Welcome to Chaos, Logos, Order, where we apply the ideas of Jordan Peterson in order to create lives of increasingly heroic meaning. With our hosts, Guy Sengstock of thecirclinginstitute.com and Mark Michael Lewis, that's me, from the game of heroicmeaning.com. We're going through Jordan Peterson's new book, Beyond Order, chapter by chapter. In this episode, we go through Chapter 1, Do Not Carelessly Denigrate Social Institutions or Creative Achievement. So shall we just dive in?
Let's dive in.
Let's dive in.
So, Mark, there was this chapter.
Yeah. Like the first chapter in the book, Beyond Order by Jordan Peterson? Yes. That we're going through chapter by chapter? There's this chapter? Yes. Really? What was it about?
It was essentially about this. The ability to conform unquestionably trumps the inability to conform. However, the refusal to conform, when the social surround has become pathological, incomplete, archaic, willfully blind, corrupt, is something of even higher value, as is the capacity to offer creative and valid alternatives. Mm-hmm. So I think this sets up what I'm hearing in this one is this sets up the main dialectic, right? Mm-hmm. So beyond order. In that he's making what I hear is he's pointing out that you can only, in some sense, if it could be one or the other, the ability to conform, right, order, and the ability to be socialized, right, and to follow rules and know how to do and respect the social and the public order and the family order and all the institutions, right, is you have to go through this period of socialization. And that if you don't have that, you can't open to the chaotic, right? You can't open to the other. So he's grounding, he's making I think he's saying essentially a deep truth, right? About that. Well, he talks a lot about being socialized. I really like the way that he talked about, just being socialized, being around other people, right? Is how you get, in some sense, shaped, right? Like, they approve of you if you do this. If you point at that thing, they laugh. And they're constantly, as you're coming to language, right, the adults cheer you in certain ways and they frown on you in other ways, and that constantly goes on throughout your whole life. And that on some level, if you're socialized, you've been, you could say, deeply initiated, right, in order, right? That's vital for your survival and everything, right? And if you don't have that, people won't want to be around you. And if they don't want to be around you, right?
Of course, so many places to go. I'm going to step back. Continue? Yeah. So this he in the quote that you gave, it was about, you could say, the benefits of order, and what I hear you saying is, without order, there is only chaos. And Jordan Peterson didn't talk about it in this chapter, but he said so many other times that the natural state of an organism is fear. It's anxiety, because John Vervaeke says we've got combinatorial explosion only everywhere. Right? The world is just infinitely dangerous if we don't know where we are. If we don't have order, if we haven't made sense of the environment, you put a rat into a new environment and it just goes crazy until it learns the environment. But also human beings, you put human beings in an environment where they don't know what's going on, they freak out. And he hasn't said that, but so without order, without a sense of I know where I am, I know that I can manage being in this situation. Without that, it's fear and anxiety as the natural state. Not that peace is the natural state and then something happens that brings us fear. The natural state is fear, but we learn how to deal with it, right? And like kids, like my grandson's 13 months now, and we take care of him each day, and so I play with him each day, and it's like you put him into an environment where he doesn't know what's going on, and he's just like, he wants to cling, he wants to hold on, he doesn't know what's going on, but put him in his comfortable environment, and now all of a sudden it's his to explore. The order provides the foundation on which we can move and dance and build and reach into the unknown. Am I hearing that?
That's what I'm getting.
Yeah,
and that there's something I think the thing that he's emphasizing, I'm hearing in this chapter, is that has got to come first, right? And that the respect for that, as in some sense as the starting point, right? And if you mature, right, and you look like you take on a role, for example, and whatever it is, right, and you become really helpful in that role, you like put everything into that role, right? That you can start to go up the hierarchy of responsibility, and that even at a certain point you can actually become so good at that role that in some sense you start to write you can in some sense, I think about it like reading a text, right? That like you can read a text and you can get what the author's saying so deeply, right? That if you imagine that at some point you get it so deeply that the next chapter, right, is you find yourself writing the next chapter. Right?
You could. You can improvise. Like I think about guitar because it's like once you learn the basic chord structure, once you learn the scales, once you learn the various skills, then you can improvise on the guitar. But if you just pick up a guitar,
exactly,
it's not called improvisation, right? It's called noise.
Yes.
Like once you have learned a song, and this is like half the fun of jamming with your friends, is that you learn the song, you set up a chord progression, even if you're making it up as you go. People learn the chord progression, and then you can start changing it because you've got the base. So you can creatively express new things in alignment that fit with that old thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the chapter is do not denigrate social institutions or achievement. So, he's setting up Beyond Order. It's interesting that it's like this is the book that's beyond order. This is the big book that critiques order. And the first chapter is, hey, like order is really important.
Yeah.
Right? You don't, and we're going to get into this, but it's like you don't really get permission to improvise and go past order until you've mastered it to the degree that you're competent with it.
Yeah.
Right? Because then you're just destroying. The metaphors he uses, the attack helicopter, right? If an attack helicopter is broken, the chances that you're going to fix it by meddling with it Or almost zero, because it's just too complex and you don't have the skills. Now, if you're an attack helicopter mechanic, then you get to meddle with it.
Right.
If you're an attack helicopter engineer, then you can improve on it. But otherwise, the chances that you're going to improve are very, very small. One of the quotes I pulled out is basically to that. So if we're saying don't denigrate social institutions or achievement, it's like have gratitude towards. In fact, I will pull out the gratitude quote just a sec, because this is there are two things. First, he defines gratitude. He says there are people whose expertise exceeds your own, and you should be wisely pleased about that.
Yes.
Right? When my car breaks down, I'm really, really glad that there are mechanics that I can pay to fix it. Gratitude.
Right.
When I need a new piece of clothing, like there are just almost an infinite amount of things I can just go buy. It's just done. And I look around my life and it seems like almost everything is like that. The question is, what am I going to buy that some other person has already created? And I go camping. Like camping's a really, really great example, because you go out camping. Well, I mean, of course you have the tent and you have the backpack and you have the water and you have, but even then, you go out camping and it's like, oh wow, you know what? I can barely survive on my own. Like, but we don't. So the fact that all of this exists, within which we can use it, and even potentially critique it if we're sufficiently masterful that we can critique it with grace.
Yeah.
Right? And then he says, the universal rules of fair play. And this gets into like how, I'm going to take one more step back. So one of the purposes, goals of this conversation that we've agreed on is that we're not so much looking to offer a political diagnosis of the world. Like, we're not looking to use Jordan Peterson's work to diagnose society. Perhaps partially because of this. Partially, specifically because of this rule. But because what you and I do is we work with people who want better lives. They might be in pain and they want to reduce and get out of pain and perhaps even get into pleasure. Right? They've got relationships that are troubled and we want to make them better. They've got distance and they want intimacy. Or they just want their lives to be deeper, more meaningful. Right? We work with people.
Yeah.
Like I know you and I do the same thing. We stand right here or we sit right here and we talk to human beings who feel and want and care and love. And we have our attention on understanding them and holding them and being with them and challenging them and offering them tools and guiding them so that they make choices that make their life better. That's what this thing is about. And that's what this is about. How do you use Jordan Peterson in your own psyche? Perhaps with your friends if they have asked for it. Right? The nice thing about a coaching relationship is that people are asking for my input into their life. As you know, I have a basic rule: no unsolicited coaching. Right? I don't. I don't offer people coaching unless, like, we have that relationship. right? Or unless I'll say, hey, I've got something for you. Do you want it? But so that relationship, but it's all about making your life better. So coming back here, he's talking about gratitude. He's talking about, this is at the end of the chapter. He has this quote that I'm about to read, and it's kind of one of the summaries of how do you use this. So he says, the universal rules of fair play include the ability to regulate emotion and motivation while cooperating and competing in the pursuit of a goal during a game. Right? So fair play, like how does this order thing work? Well, we set up shared expectations and rules, and then we regulate our emotions and our motivations as we compete and cooperate. We cooperate by staying within the rules, and we compete by trying to best each other or do our best within the context of the rules where the competition is encouraged. We cooperate and compete. That's the nature of a game. So we regulate our emotions and our motivations. We must do that if we're going to have fair play. We have to manage ourselves, order. Okay? And then he says, right, this is part and parcel of being able to play at all. And then he says, as well as the ability and will to establish reciprocally beneficial interactions across time and across situations and across people. Right? The fact that the game exists, that this social order exists so that I can go out in public. We're one of the only mammals where two people from different social groups who do not know one another can meet each other in the wild. We can come across someone who we've never met before, and we don't need to do a dominance display. Right? Almost all other creatures, like you get two dogs together who have never met, and the first thing they have to like check each other out and set up dominance. If two chickens, two wolves, two bears, any creature, two monkeys get together, like they meet somebody new, that person is potentially dangerous or potentially an ally or a subject. So like, we're the only creatures who don't do that. Why? Because we have social order. I can walk down the street in most places, like not everywhere, but in the United States, in most places, I can walk down the street. And the game is you don't attack other people. That's the game, right? You respect other people's space. You respect their person. That game, the fact that that exists, and we can play it and set up these reciprocal, the appropriate relationship to that is gratitude. Gratitude that that system exists. And the first part of Beyond Order is him saying, look, I'm about to talk about all the problems of order. But first, let's recognize what an achievement order is. So the quote you gave had two parts. Like one is like order is important, and then there's the next part. But like, don't denigrate social institutions and achievement because they provide you with the foundation to do amazing things. I mean, even if you want to critique it, even if you learn it and master it with sufficient skill, as we'll get into, right, that you can go beyond the letter of the law in service of the spirit of the law.
One of the ways I get this a lot is there's there's a way in which, and he mentions a number of times where he talks about, like, you you start learning the rules of the game, and you start cooperating and playing the game, right? And that you go on, and that the child actually starts to abide by the rules of the game and starts to cooperate at different levels without having any ability or knowledge, direct knowledge, to articulate the rules that it's following, right?
We can play a game before we can name the rules.
Yeah, exactly. And it's at that level where I think that it's like when you find yourself already begun in a social context, right? Already in response to somebody on the street, all these things that are so embedded in your body that you, in some way, are always finding yourself beginning in the midst of, that ground, right, is, I just noticed that when people get in touch with that, it's like a miracle, right? It's like that just the amount of distance between one person and the other, and you can feel when it's too close, right? And that there's I'm already sensing into things that I don't even need to consciously know about, right? Such that I've been standing on, and that, and I noticed circling that recognition, right? When people kind of get that sense of things, right? Even their problems, right? Even some issue that they're struggling with that, like, hasn't been working for them. The very struggle is predicated on an intention that's good, right? That sense of that we're sitting on top of so much evolution, right? So much, like, so many traditions that it's almost impossible to become conscious of it all, right? And I think that's one of the things that can be the source of that gratitude in a lived way, right? So it's like, kind of, in some sense, it's like what we were talking about in our last conversation about when a client of mine kind of stopped a particular form of a form of rumination, of kind of undermining, right, all of the order, let's say, without giving me an alternative, right, for another thing.
Yes, getting caught in the endless deconstructions and subversions of the existing order, as fascinating as that is. He was caught in that, and then he stopped that, and
he just started to see that as a phenomenon, let's say. And then he just noticed that he was anxious. That was the unarguable thing, that he was anxious. And so when he started to just put the brakes on that and just notice that he wasn't breathing, and just breathing, he did this interesting thing where he just looked around, and his life started to speak to him, right? So stuff at work that he hadn't been tending to, right? And he started responding to it, right? There's a sense in which we already begin, like, in some sense, we come into the moment, and we're always in a social context. We're always in a social role. And that essentially is a gift that we stand on top of we don't even have to recognize it, and it's already underway, right? So there's a deep sense of this. It's like all the way into our biology, and we're constantly on that basis, right? So I find myself continually grateful for that.
Yeah, and I think Jordan Peterson would say, I certainly experience it, well, in my own life, but working with clients, right? Everybody has challenges, right? As I like to say, when you create goals, anytime you create a goal, you create obstacles, right? There's no obstacles unless you're trying to get somewhere, right? And depending on what you create obstacles. And who you become in the process of facing those obstacles is the one thing that you keep. Right? Goals change and you get something and then it goes away and then you find something else. But like who you are continually grows. Your belief that you can do that, the recognition of all of the achievements that you have made in your own life, all of the skills that you've built, all of the capacities, which happen automatically, they happen unconsciously. You walk into a room and you just succeed almost everywhere. But as Heidegger, as Jordan Peterson points out, like, you don't notice that you're succeeding everywhere because you're succeeding. I reach out and I get my glass, and I don't think about the fact that I have all the coordination to get the glass. I know what the glass does. I'll do, like, it doesn't show up for me until I hurt my hand and I can't like get the glass. And all of a sudden I realize all the competence that I already have. And so everybody has challenges. My clients, one of the main things that I help them do is to remember that they are competent to deal with the challenges. That they have an enormous standing reserve of skills. Right? Just an enormous, the level of accomplishment that they already have is huge. And to the degree that they recognize that, then it's like, okay, like you're saying, in circling in I like the core transformation process where you get down to a core intention. Like the thing that's really driving them is positive and beautiful and even divine.
Yep.
When you recognize that, when you recognize the achievements that you already have, because part of this chapter is about like don't denigrate social institutions, but don't denigrate achievement. Other people's achievement, but your own achievement. Don't denigrate your own internalized social institutions. Honor them, feel gratitude for yourself so that when the obstacles come up, you can face them with good cheer, knowing that you've got you on your side. Yeah. Like, hey, I've got me on my team. I'll handle the obstacles. Right? That, remembering that. Because they're always going to have challenges. The question is, how do you approach them? That's the main thing. Do you approach the challenges in your life with good cheer, with faith in your capacity to learn?
To remember yourself.
To remember. Yes. To
remember
yourself. And, like Plato and Jordan Peterson says later on in this chapter or in the book, that it's useful to think that all you're doing in learning is remembering. That there's so many capacities that are built into us from an evolutionary perspective. There's so many capacities just to tap into the genius that you are. That really learning is remembering.
Yep.
Right? Even if you don't know how to play guitar yet, and you have to develop the skill to play guitar. Like, I don't remember how to play guitar. This is, you could say, the challenge with the remembering hypothesis is like, I don't remember how to play guitar. I train myself how to play guitar. But in either case, you have that platform, that base with which to work with, remembering that.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Yep.
If you approach your life, I call it a game attitude. If you approach your life like a game, well, then all you have to do is learn the skills. Learn the strategies, get good at the game, and you can get good at anything you set your mind to. If you have that attitude, I can win, I can do this if I want to, if I apply myself. If I have gratitude for the order that I am and trust in that order, then I can extend outwards. So again, the when I was reading this, I'll set this frame and then give it back to you. I'm less interested in honoring social institutions, like as some moral, political thing. I'm interested in honoring social institutions so that myself, my clients can use them in order to make their lives better, in order to make the lives of the people around them better, in order to make it better now, in order to make it better in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And by not denigrating the social institutions, by not denigrating reality as it is, like reality is the way that it is right now. It is exactly the way that it is. You've heard me, like, it can't be any more the way that it is than it already is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, it is what it is perfectly. It's reality is the one perfect thing.
Right.
And boom, right now you inherit it. Like, boom, there it is. Now,
right.
Are you going to spend your time making reality wrong because it doesn't match your idea of how you think it should be? Mm-hmm. Right? Is that where you're going to spend your time and energy? Or are you going to learn how to work with reality to shape it into what you want? It's your canvas. It's your foundation. That, don't denigrate reality as it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Don't denigrate the achievement that you are, the reality that you are. Like, don't denigrate that. Leverage it. Leverage it. Like, it's a game. Get good at being, period. But get good at being yourself. Get good at being in relationship. Get good at being in society. Get good at being in your career. Get good at being with your body. If you denigrate institutions, right? That process of denigrating, that's a way of being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Robert McDonald, one of my great mentors, I've mentioned him to you many, many times. He says that the hate that I feel towards you must pass through my heart first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you're denigrating social institutions, if you're denigrating the existing game, right? Not learning it and then improving it, but denigrating it.
Right. Right.
If you're denigrating achievement, that denigration has to go through your soul first. And then your soul becomes something that denigrates achievement, something that denigrates, and that lens is going to come back on you. You're going to denigrate your own achievements. You're going to denigrate the self that you've built to this point, which is freaking amazing. Again, 13-year-old grandson. 13-month-old grandson. My 5-year-old grandson, watching them, like, they had to build this self. They didn't know any. It's such an achievement. Okay, I'm sorry. This chapter is, when you apply it to yourself rather than out there, it's just so rich.
Yeah, totally. Well, the one of the things I called my son this earlier this week, and he had just gotten he's 18. He just got his first job at a he
is such a good kid. I love him.
He wants to get in fact, he's just about ready to buy a Tesla, actually.
Wow. That's slightly different than my 18.
Yeah, and he's been working at like a warehouse. And I call him, he answers the phone, he's like, "Hey Dad, I gotta go. I'm getting ready to go basically introduce my mind to the CEO. I have an idea that's going to save him all this money. I don't want to work in this factory anymore, and I want this car." So he's got a meeting. He's got a meeting set up to present his idea. It's going to save all this money, and I knew he was going to do that. I knew he was going to just start to coordinate right where he was, and this is a good example of that. He's using his mind to fully be valuable where he is to understanding it such that he can present something
through understanding it. Yes,
exactly, that sense of understanding. And what's interesting about that is I've often thought about this with him because he's incredibly socially coordinated, right? Incredibly. He's been that way since he was a kid. And I think a lot of that, right, came out of a couple things. Like one, he had two sisters, like quite a bit older than him, that he got to throw things at and they would laugh, or they'd throw things at and then they would scream. And so he's constantly working out this coordinated, like what Peterson's talking about in the social coordination, right, is really true. And so he's constantly working that out. And then we had neighbors who were it was a big Mexican family that was constantly having people live with them, right? And so he became friends with the whole family. So he was constantly, right, coordinating games, and they didn't speak any English. And then he was kind of trying to teach them English, and he ended up just becoming super friendly and becoming the one who organized the whole games and constantly working all of that out. And the thing I just appreciate about all that, and then I would wrestle him. I remember he had this need to wrestle. Like it was like a need to wrestle. And what it was about, really, he'd walk inside, he'd walk into the door, and he'd look at me, and I'd look at him, and we knew exactly what was going to happen. He was going to come up and body slam me, and it was as if he was constantly pushing up against something, and if it went too far and he'd get feedback, he'd get kind of upset, and then he would try it again, and
he would figure out where the boundaries are.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what he was just doing constantly, and he had a lot of that. And so what's really interesting is now wherever he goes, he can observe in a way he's both conscious of and just is built on top of all of this social coordination, right? And so he just learns the system, presents the idea at the right time, has those relationships, and the world starts to open up to him, right? So this is very much about and I think that's an important part here is because that's definitely what I've learned in terms of leading, in doing the work with circling. Is so much of it is about being with somebody and really listening to them, right? Really listening to them, and then having the response, the contribution, or what we end up saying is in direct response to everything that they're, I'm learning about them, and then I'm in response to what I'm learning, right? And so the more that happens, right, the more they see that, and the more they open up, and then the more I open up, and then the more everyone opens up, and there's this whole thing that can start to create. But that's that fundamental sense of respect and reciprocity, right? Of
not denigrating.
Yeah.
And the opposite of denigrating, respecting, reciprocity, considering, right? Being able,
also spectacle.
Yes.
Relook, right? To meaning that you may not know exactly what's going on, right? And there's something to relook at continually. Yes.
And this is the dance, the interplay, the balance between order and chaos.
Yep.
Right. When I see you, when Forrest sees the situation, the order, being able to sync with the order, to coordinate, right? To take the existing order and find your place in it, whether it's at the bottom or as a peer or at the top, like to find your place in the order or the orders, and to be able to coordinate with it, to take your spot in it appropriately, to recognize how it works. Then to be able to offer chaos, to offer something new as a contribution rather than as a critique and a denigration. Right?
Yep.
He doesn't go in there and say, like, what would be, I would say, the normal conversation, because to do what your son did is heroic in the sense that he's taking responsibility to deal with order and to coordinate with it, and to offer the new and the unknown in such a way that it can be integrated into the order, the artistry, and to take responsibility to discover and understand the order such that you can work with it, to steer it, to move it. Right? Yep. That's that attack helicopter thing. You have to understand what's going on and understand the system so that you can offer a solution. To choose that is heroic because it's difficult. It doesn't you have to build that skill, and you have to start at the beginning. Like Jordan, again, in the chapter someplace, he says, you have to walk before you can run, and sometimes you need to crawl before you can walk. Right? To recognize that wherever you at your level of coordination, the thing to do is to get better at coordinating so that you can add in the next thing. In my experience, the non-heroic choice, right? And because people in this conversation don't know what I mean by heroic. Like, heroic is taking responsibility towards heaven. Taking responsibility to move the situation, your life, your relationships towards heaven rather than hell. To choose that and to take responsibility for it, I call that the heroic choice. The opposite of heroism is villainy. It's to be the villain. And the villain, like, takes responsibility to move the situation towards hell. And if you denigrate without offering something new, if you don't bother to learn the order or coordinate, and you just denigrate, you're not adding, you're screwing up the attack helicopter. You're not making it better. It's much harder to improve. Like, I like a 99 to 1. 99 times out of 100, unless you're skilled, you're going to make things worse rather than better if you're denigrating, if you do. So the normal thing would be, instead of working out his plan, setting up a meeting with the CEO, designing his presentation so that it takes into account what's going on, offers the solution in terms that they can understand and value. Instead of doing that, the normal thing would be that he goes and hangs out with his friends, or he talks to you and you say, "Hey, Forrest, how's it going?" And he says, "Oh, this place is so stupid. They do this stupid thing and they waste all of this money, and gosh, just like the incompetence, like, and just denigrate. Not understand and find solutions and build the skills so that you can offer solutions. Again, you have to learn how to play the guitar before you can improvise. You can't jam with people if you don't know how to play. Because instead of making the whole thing better, you make it worse."
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think the thing about it. See, what's interesting about this is, like, the thing I'm hearing at a very deep level, right, that he's pointing to in this chapter, right, is it's not like you're ever outside of an order, right? you're always, if you're a person and you're speaking, you're playing a role given to you by your culture, right?
You're using language created by your culture.
There's always an order that you already find yourself in. And so on some level, right, and it's what I hear from this is that another way of saying what you just said is it's through really paying attention, right? From the standpoint of understanding where you're at with respect, that you will begin to, one, it will reveal your inherent skills at something, right? And things will start to speak to you, right? That you find yourself starting to encounter, and then in the process of actually like a deep sense of respect, that a creativity will start to form out of a competence that starts from that relationship, right? That it's from within the order that we always find ourselves in, that gratitude and that respect is the very thing that has you pay attention, right, to where you're at, right? And that's like so crucial.
Yeah.
In every respect, even like with yourself, you know this with clients,
especially like, with yourself, and especially when you're talking with someone that you care about.
Yep. Or you're talking to yourself, like that. There's a like befriending yourself, right? The fact that you're having a difficult time with the situation and you don't know how to deal with it, right? Well, you had a self that kind of allowed yourself to be in that situation, right? So you played the guitar well enough to get to this point, right? So respect that one. Respect all of where you come from, right? And from that point, you can start to approach this. Right?
Yeah. Let's bring back one of the rules from the first book. Treat yourself as if you're someone that you're responsible for, that you care for, that it's your responsibility to care for. Care for yourself as if you are responsible for yourself. Right? One of the phrases that I like is that we tell stories to ourselves like a mother to a child. Right? Do we treat ourselves with the care and the consideration that we would like treat someone that we love? Right? Do we love ourselves? Do we respect ourselves? Do we recognize that however good it is right now, right, knowing that it could be infinitely better in every dimension, like I look at myself and I recognize I could be better. Like there isn't any area of my life that I could not be infinitely better than I am. That's true. That's true. However, what I have accomplished, the self that I have right now, is also amazing. It's an achievement. I should not denigrate it. I should care for it.
Yeah.
Yes, make it better. Yes, there's infinite better to get. But that doesn't mean that you have to denigrate this. And this is the beyond order. He gives a whole series of metaphoric examples. The Harry Potter playing Quidditch. Right. The seeker, the one who goes after the round chaos, the snitch, right? The potential for the higher level game.
Right.
The seeker is one of the best players at the actual game of Quidditch. Like, there's two games going on. There's the game of Quidditch, the normal game, and then there's this meta game where the best players not only play that game, but they play another game towards a higher goal.
Yep.
They go beyond order. They master order. And it's because they are one of the best at the game of Quidditch, that they're one of the best on the broom, that they get to play this higher thing. They seek the higher points.
Yep, totally.
Right. And that...
The meta.
Right. And it's recognizing and honoring the self that you are, such that you can move forward. Now, I want to offer a frame that it's just something I use all the time. So I call it bandwidth. Like right now, in this moment, I can only concentrate on so much. I can only use my intelligence and my consciousness and my awareness. I can only direct it with a certain amount of focus, and I can only include a certain amount of information in what I'm looking at. It's like bandwidth in an internet connection. There's only so much bandwidth.
Yep.
Every unit of bandwidth that you're using denigrating the existing order, denigrating reality as it is, that you're denigrating yourself, that you're practicing the denigration move. It's like you're building the muscle to denigrate. I can critique anything. I can be self-righteous about everything. I can find things wrong, and I'm building this muscle, and I'm becoming this creature. Like, don't practice anything that you don't want to be. So I'm practicing denigration. Every unit of energy and attention that you spend in denigration becomes unavailable for creation, for seeking, for coordinating, for dancing, and creating the high. If you really want to be creative, because there's the conservative and the creative, or the liberal. Yep. If you really want to be creative, you need to master order. The more you master order, the more you can be truly creative, not destructive. Not destructive. Yes. Yeah. And denigration, self-righteousness takes up so much bandwidth. Like, you can be in a conversation with someone, and then they say something that annoys the hell out of you. Right? They do something that triggers off your particular, whatever your thing is. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. However you get offended. Like, you get offended, and then notice what character takes over. And how much bandwidth does that take? Self-righteousness takes so much bandwidth that it's like you just don't have enough intelligence available to actually make your life better, to actually make the lives of the people you care about better, to learn what's actually going on such that you can work with it to make it better, rather like to set up the meeting with the CEO where you propose the better way of doing things.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Versus to complain.
Yes.
Right. Thomas Sowell, the great economist and social theorist, he says, it always amazes me how much time people invest into pointing out how human institutions are imperfect. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Of course they're imperfect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. As we get through the book, because it's beyond order, it's like once you have your beliefs, once you recognize the self that you have is what it is, if you stop denigrating it, but instead learn to work with it, then it opens up all of the creativity of going beyond it, of going into the unknown, of creativity. Yep. Order is always imperfect, of course. Mm-hmm. The nature of reality is that it is more complex than our best story. Our stories will always be inadequate. I call it infinite failure. Like there's always infinity further to go on all the dimensions.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, yes, that's the way that it is. But if you don't work with it as it is, all you're going to do is use up your bandwidth with destruction rather than creation. And if you really want to be creative, you must learn to coordinate.
Yeah.
That's creativity. Just criticizing, just denigrating, it's not good for your soul. It's not good for your relationships. It's also not good for society. Because unless you can coordinate and say, okay, given my critique, here's how to work with what is, rather than saying, well, I'm in a relationship in my life. I've got this partner. And my partner is not being the person that I want them to be. I have a rule book, and I say that they should do X and they shouldn't do Y. And they're doing X and not doing Y. Like, they're not being who I want them to be. Right? I think this is a common pattern. What do you do in that situation? Well, if we take this idea of not denigrating existing social institutions and achievements, and we apply it to the relationship, you do not denigrate them for who they are being. You don't get self-righteous with them. Why? Because then it's just going to lead into that. Is that going to make the relationship better? Like, if I criticize my partner enough, the relationship's going to get better? Does anyone actually believe that would work? No, it's just that they don't regulate themselves. But if they say, okay, my partner is not being who I want them to be, I want them to treat me better. That's what I want. I want my partner to treat me better. Okay, I'm not going to denigrate them. I'm going to say, what's your world? You just did this thing. What were you thinking? Help me understand the world that you're coming from, that you thought that was an okay thing to do. And then I want you to know how it impacted me. Let's coordinate. Let me respect you to the point where you feel so respected that you're willing to extend respect to me. Yeah. That's the thing.
So right there. Yeah, it's also the thing of where I think it's, because usually when one of the things I've noticed is, like, in myself and in other people, that thing that you're just describing, like the blame, essentially the blaming, self-righteous victim villain thing, is like, one is that I can start to notice in my own head, I become very predictable, right? Like, I can start to notice, oh, here's that point where it looks like this. Oh, here's that point where I say to myself this. Here's that point where I already anticipated it. And you can start to, there's an automaticity that's almost stimulus response, and it's predictable. And I've noticed that with other people, is if you can really start to predict what somebody's going to say, they're usually in that very thing that you're talking about, right? And what's interesting about that too is even that, right, in the example that you just gave, and is you say, I want to feel respected, right? Is that what you said? You asked, you said, I want to feel respected, right, by my partner.
I do.
Was that what you said?
I don't know that I said that, but I do want to feel respected by my partner.
Yes.
I want my partner to respect what I think, what I feel, what I want, to care, to want to know what I think, what I feel, what I want, so that they can act in a way that works for me, so they can coordinate with me.
Yeah. What I'm hearing with it is the difference between those two has everything to do with something hurt, right? Like, which presupposes the want, right? And that hurt is a completely different, like the response of, who are you? Tell me about what just happened there, so I can understand where you're coming from, right? And getting their world, versus pain, you're a bad person. Denigrate. Yeah.
I feel pain, disrespect, my boundaries are violated.
Yes.
When that happens, which story do I tell, right? I suggest, right, this is Game of Heroic Meaning stuff. It's like, I suggest when that happens, and it's going to happen, Right. This is like the nature of reality, is that other people have different rules. And so they follow their rules. They're playing their game, and they think they're doing the right thing, and you don't. Right. That's the nature of it. So you feel disrespected, uncared for, violated. When that happens, do you tell a victim story and become self-righteous and denigrate and attack? Right? Or do you become responsible and choose how you are going to respond according to what it is that you want, your values? Do you become able to respond according to your values? And that's the heroic choice. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Jordan Peterson, again, we'll get into it, but there's order and chaos, and then the intelligence that we are of the logos, of being able to name it, being able to recognize it and coordinate with it such that we can go beyond it, that creativity of intelligence. And being that, we can either be the hero or the villain. We can use our intelligence to denigrate. We can spend our time and energy denigrating ourselves, denigrating the people that we're in relationship, denigrating the institutions that we're interacting with. Mm-hmm. You got something?
Yep. Well, yeah. There's the part where, see, I think this can start to sound like, I think, with people where they can, like, that they're going to change that through an act of will, right? They're going to go from a victim self-righteousness to another thing. And I don't think that's what we're talking about, right? What you're talking about is that there's a relationship you have when you talked about take responsibility for yourself, right? Mm-hmm. It's like there's a relationship to pain and a response to that pain, right? Which is fundamentally different, right? So it's like I've just noticed this working with couples over and over and over again, right? In my own relationship, is it's when that's happening, there's actually something going on that's unarguable, some kind of hurt, let's say, and that when one takes their attention and becomes responsible for that, right, and feels it and listens to it, right, understands yourself, right, and then from that place seeks to understand you while revealing who you are. That I think that's what we're talking about, responsibility. Is that what you mean?
Yes, and. Let me, I don't want to, everything about Jordan Peterson's work is about taking responsibility. And so defining how you and I understand responsibility, not necessarily as a technical philosophical term, although that's part of it, but really how does it play out in the phenomenological encounter of self and reality, or self-reality, right? That occurring blossoming of experience that we are. Like, how does responsibility play? How can we use that idea in order to move our experience towards heaven and away from hell? Like, how do we... Now, of course, this is deeper than I can say. However, I want to talk about willpower and the power of will and what it means to have free will. And I mean, it's huge and deep, but it's at the heart of what Jordan Peterson is talking about. It's at the heart of what Jordan Peterson is talking about. He comes from a psychoanalytic tradition, and the great genius of Nietzsche and I'll say the psychoanalysts that he birthed. Now, like Freud is the guy, but it's to recognize that we are not a self. We do not have a self. We have selves. We have drives, we have values, we have goals, and sometimes they're different.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Again, when I play with my grandson, it's different than when I'm doing coaching. It's different than when I'm navigating through a social space. The arena calls out a different agent, and then I go on a different adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And the agent, that I have multiple agencies.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
to the degree that I recognize that,
Mm-hmm.
there becomes this meta-awareness that recognizes that I have multiple agencies. There's an awareness that recognizes that I have different goals and agencies, different parts, different motivations, different drives, different concerns, different personalities. Jordan Peterson talks about personalities, that we have these different personalities, that every goal has a personality. Every adventure in an arena has an agent, and depending on the goal, it's a different agent. We create personalities for the goals that we're going after. It's a way of thinking about what actually happens in our brain. But there's a meta-awareness that says everything that I'm experiencing is one of those personalities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That awareness and the ability to remember that, to choose to remember that, that is the fundamental act of free will. We can choose how we're going to interpret what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody does something that violates one of my boundaries. I have an unconscious boundary. This is how it should be. This is what person should do, and here's what they shouldn't do. And they didn't do the thing they should do, or they did the thing that they shouldn't do. They have violated my boundary, my expectation, and my body responds to that by giving me an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Might be anger, might be fear, might be sadness, might be terror, might be surprise, right?
Yeah.
So I have this feeling. Now, am I that feeling? Or do I have that feeling? Right, there's this, in the authentic relating, circling community, people talk about being with your experience.
Yeah.
Well, that means I am having an experience. My experience is not who I am. It is a part, but it's only one part of me. I am bigger than the experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, partially that's a skill that you grow and develop.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most awesome things about circling, the thing that where it impacted me personally the most, is that dealing with my own inadequacies, my own failures to be who I want to be. I have an ideal of who I want to be. And then I act in such a way that is below the standard that I have set for myself. Call it a failure to be.
Right.
And in the face of confronting that, I feel shame, and I feel fear, and I feel disconcerted and unsafe, and the world is no longer safe. Because the world is judging me as inadequate and broken. And that feeling is terrifying. So I don't feel it. So I do anything not to feel it. I find other things to focus on, and I find somebody wrong. See, you violated my boundaries, and I reacted in such a way that I'm not proud of. So I have to get doubly angry at you to avoid having to feel that I didn't respond in a way that I'm proud of. Right? I don't want to feel that. So in circling, what I experience over and over and over is an environment of people who are being so respectful, so caring, but it's not even that, it's just present. They're not adding the whole level of judging. It's not that they're judging me positively, they're not judging me negatively, they're just witnessing, present, responding, reacting truthfully, just being. And in that, it creates an environment, an experience of safety that allows me to look at my failures to be, or what I'm considering a failure to be, right? Because I'm the one who set the unrealistic standard that I can't even meet, right? But that experience of failing to be in this safe context, I can afford to look at it. I can afford to be with it rather than run from it and distract from it. Rather than use one of my defense mechanisms so that I don't have to feel it, I can actually be with it. And in being with it, this witnessing self, this watching self, the self that is other than that, the self that is higher than that is deeper than that is bigger than that, exists. It becomes the most of my bandwidth. Instead of this taking all of my bandwidth, this takes my bandwidth. And this part grows.
Yes.
I can get better at that. That is a skill.
Yeah.
I can choose to get better at that. And that is responsibility. It's to choose how I respond to the pain that I'm feeling. I don't get to choose whether or not I feel pain. My boundary was violated. I have an unconscious response. The pain is there. The fear is there. The question is, how do I respond to that pain? Can I choose how I respond to that pain through willpower? I can develop the skill. I can develop the power to choose, to will how I relate to the experience I'm having.
Yeah.
That is the one place that we have free will. That is the one place. In witnessing.
In the witnessing that the other people encircling, they witness it. What do they understand, right, in that witnessing that allows you to do what you just talked about? What is that in that witnessing? What's it? What's implied in that that's good?
Right. Says the guy who created circling. It's one of the reasons it's one of the reasons people love you, Guy. Right? Because this is your life, this is your baby, this is your creation. And you're like, Mark, so what happens? Explain circling to me, Mark. And yes. I mean, it's just so glad to have you in my life, man. So, to bring it back to the chapter.
Yeah.
They do not denigrate me. They do not denigrate me. They do not denigrate the existing social institutions that I am, the existing unconscious structures and all of who I am up to this point. They don't denigrate it. Everything that I've achieved and everything I haven't achieved, right? They don't denigrate me.
Yeah.
They look to understand me. I feel in that moment, love, caring, a desire for my well-being and thriving, a caring for me that says, no, who are you? No, be like whatever you are.
Yeah.
Whatever edge, wherever you're blossoming, wherever you're contracting, whatever that is, that. Experience that. Be with that.
And is that, would you say,
be with
right,
reality. Yeah.
in that sense of reality, just kind of bringing it back to the chapter, I was just
Yeah.
wondering about, is that response a way of respecting an order called mark, and exactly the way it is?
It's and the chapters don't denigrate.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But the examples of mastery that he gives,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's once you've stopped denigrating, now you have all the bandwidth available to coordinate and compete. Right? You have to be able to you have to be able to regulate your emotions and your motivations. If when you feel the pain overwhelms you and you become an instrument for the pain takes over and you lash out from the pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? To the degree that happens, you can't master. That's where you're going to end up denigrating. Again, when I get scared, when I go into shame and I'm trying to avoid it, like most people, the easiest thing that you do is you attack the other person. You focus on their faults rather than your cleaning your room.
Right.
Right? Like I'm going to focus on you cleaning your room.
Right.
This isn't about me and my room. This is about you and your room.
This is about you stopping blaming me.
This is about you stopping being self-righteous with me. If that was not the conversation that I see in my relationship practice, like every freaking time, it's someone going, they're being self-righteous with me.
Yeah.
That once you relax that, once you recognize that the self that you is, the phenomenological awareness that you are, contains your experience. It's not that it's not you, but the you that you can be if you choose to be and if you develop it, can be with the most intense experiences possible and not let them rule you. But that, and I do call that willpower, and I do think that that's what responsibility is about. Taking responsibility. What do you take responsibility to do? You take responsibility to stay at the higher level of awareness so that you don't allow the pain or the suffering of the moment to send you into a denigrating, self-righteous spiral. Now, learning how to do that is a skill. It's a muscle. It's a capacity. You have to learn how to do it. But if you choose to get on the path of learning how to do that, that's the heroic choice, I think. That's the choice of responsibility. It's to choose how you're going to respond.
Yeah.
Now, that's beyond order, but it's respecting order. The more you master order, the more you can go beyond it. In fact, I'm going to read one more quote. Right? And it's nice because he even tells you. He says, this sums up the meaning of Rule 1 perfectly. He says, if you understand the rules, right, their necessity, their sacredness, the chaos that they keep at bay, how they unite the communities of people who follow the rules, right? The price that has been paid to establish the rules, right? And the danger in breaking them. If you understand all of those things, and I will say the more that you understand all of these things, because I always take the if then and change it into the more. The more that you understand each of those things, then it says, and you're willing to fully shoulder the responsibility of making an exception. Mm-hmm. You're willing to shoulder the responsibility that by making an exception, you're going to be disrupting the order, and you're taking that on, knowing all of those things, valuing all of those things, to fully shoulder the responsibility of making an exception because you see that as serving a higher good, and you're a person with sufficient character to manage that distinction, right? Because you understand and value character, the price paid and the danger of breaking the rules and the value of the rules, and because you understand those things, you can recognize what's something better than that. Yeah. You have the capacity to make that distinction because you have sufficient character. Yeah. What is character? Character is that part of you that takes responsibility. Character is the practice of being the hero. The more you practice being the hero, the more you choose to take responsibility to regulate your emotions and your motivations such that you can cooperate and compete. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? The more you've built that skill, the more you develop that character. If you have that character, then you can honor order and seek the good. So he says, because you see that as serving a higher good, then you have served the spirit of the rules, rather the spirit of the law, rather than the mere law. Mm-hmm. And that's an elevated moral act. You have to understand the law and respect the law so that you can know through your character, through your practice, through your increasing skill at being heroic and taking responsibility to move towards heaven, that the more you do that, the more you build that character, the more you can look past the letter of the law into its spirit. Mm-hmm. And then you can break the letter of the law in service of that which the law is in service of. This is how he describes it with Harry Potter. Like that the Harry Potter characters, the heroes in Harry Potter, are all rule followers. They're all good students. They learn how to do the magic. They follow the rules. Until and unless those rules, like the rules have a purpose, and that purpose is endangered. And so they break the rules in service of that which the rules are in service of, because they have that character. They can make the distinction. They're not breaking the rules just to break the rules. Mm-hmm. They're not finding fault with the rules because they're imperfect. Right? Mm-hmm. Right? Oh my gosh, I found something imperfect. I get immediate moral credibility by pointing out that it's imperfect when everything is imperfect, right? There's like, no, I'm not just denigrating. Mm-hmm. I'm honoring the spirit of the law. And because I'm honoring the spirit of the law, then I can break the letter of the law as an elevated moral act rather than a depraved moral act. Right. And again, there's the social institutions, but then there's me. How do I act towards me? How do I act towards you, another human being, if you are a social institution with a set of achievements? Do I understand your letter of the law to the point where I can challenge you in service of the spirit of your own laws, your own goals? As you know, one of the phrases that captured my heart and my attention early in life was, a friend is someone who knows the song of your heart and sings it to you when you have forgotten it. Mm-hmm. Right? A friend is someone who knows you as this higher heroic being, who knows your story of a hero. And like my wife, this is how deeply can I live this with her? This is the game we play. Like, how deeply can I live this? Like, what is the song of her heart? What is the spirit of her law?
Mm-hmm.
She's got boundaries. She's got rules. She's got desires. She's got things. Like, how do I understand her in such a way that I learn the song of her heart? And when she gets defensive and when I get defensive, she can sing me the song of my heart. She can remind me who I want to be lovingly, not denigrating. You're not being who you said you were going to be.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's like, Mark, wow. Notice what you're experiencing, Mark. Wow, notice that.
Yeah.
That's happening.
Yeah.
But like respect me here. Like, be your best self. She can sing the song of my heart. She can remind me of the spirit of the law, even when I'm caught in the letter of it.
Yeah. That sense of, in a certain sense, in some way, she is fully, we could say, inhabited the territory of Mark, right?
The true deep territory of Mark.
Yes,
the
exactly.
full,
the whole of it, right? So in those moments when maybe you're only speaking from a part of you, right? So she's deeply respectful of the institution of Mark, of all the things that make up Mark, so that she can, in that part that you're demonstrating, she can respectfully go, hello. Remember me, you. Like, and in some sense, she can hear that you said something earlier, the spirit of it can start to speak to you, right? You can start to get the spirit of the rules, right, versus the letter, right? But you have to understand the letters fully, and when you do, it can emerge where you actually take the reason that there were rules at all, right, and something else opens up, right, that comes in and refreshes, right? You could say refreshes and deepens that spirit and updates it. So in some sense, there's a way that she's really, 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 like, in some sense, coming from that place. And because she comes from that place, she can speak the spirit of the whole in that moment, right? Yeah. She can call out
in those moments. She is regulating her emotions and her motivations so that she can cooperate and compete.
Yep.
Right. She can cooperate. She can coordinate. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's say, theoretically, that I'm being an asshole.
Mm-hmm. Just hypothetically.
Just hypothetically. Let's say that happens. Yeah. I mean, of course it doesn't, because, hey, I'm me. But, like, theoretically, it could. Yeah. We can imagine it, at least.
Right.
Does she get upset and point the finger at me? Or does she notice that she's upset, but maintain the larger picture, maintain the larger stack of values, maintain the real values that she wants for herself, for me, for our relationship, for our partnership, for our sacred vows? Mm-hmm. Does she stay in the self that's related to that, or does she reduce down into the self that's just relating to the fact that I was an asshole?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That capacity Building that capacity is building your capacity for response ability to choose how you're going to respond in alignment with your values rather than in alignment with your emotions. To be able to regulate your emotions and your motivations so that you can cooperate and compete. That, I don't know a better word for it than willpower.
Mm-hmm.
It is the power to will the perspective you're going to take, the story that you're going to tell, the author that you're going to be, the agent that you're going to privilege. Right? I want to marginalize, right? In the technical term, I want to marginalize the pissed off response, not denigrate it.
Yeah.
But I want to privilege the response that's in alignment with the highest values. That move, I call that the move of heroism. Like that's what it means to be the logos in between order and chaos, between the known and the unknown, to take the position where you articulate the truth as best you can, the highest truth, not the truth, you are an asshole. Yes, that's true. But that's a limited, we want the largest context. Yeah. Right?
It includes more and more. The art includes more and more and more of the whole.
Of the whole, and
it's through her participation with you.
Yes.
Right. Of deeply respecting and being respectful and understanding you and her and the dynamics that allows her to actually have that view of the whole and respond in that way.
Yes. And the whole, by the whole, the soul, the song of my heart.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
Like that part. And like, again, bring it back to Jordan. Mm-hmm. We interact. We're playing. Mm-hmm. We have real world experiences and they feel good or they feel not good. Mm-hmm. They make us want to continue playing with that person or not continue playing with that person. Mm-hmm. They give us a sense of empowerment and inspiration, or they have us feel disempowered and uninspired. Like that happens real world, real time. Mm-hmm. And then we tell stories about it. We understand it. We say, here's what happened. And we tell the story about it. And then there's all the stories that we tell about all the things. And we start noticing patterns among them. And we create these meta stories. Mm-hmm. And the meta stories become symbolic. And they eventually become myths. And there's some real world what works to lead towards heaven versus hell. Real world, we abstract that into levels of story. And there's one story. I'll do another quote. So I'm going to do it from memory. We've got our conservative self. Right? And we all have our temperaments. Some people are more conservative. Some people are more open, more liberal, more creative. Mm-hmm. But by looking at all of the values of conservatism, all the values of respecting order, of respecting the achievement, of respecting the social institutions, all the goodness of that, and recognizing all the places that can go wrong. Mm-hmm. And recognizing the unknown, creativity, the willingness to break boundaries, the willingness to explore, going beyond what we already know. That liberalism, that creativity. If we take all of the good things about that and all of the dangers around that, and we look and we build up these meta stories and meta stories and meta stories to try to capture all of that information into a character, into a myth, we create an ideal personality. We create an ideal personality. Now, he suggests that Christ is an excellent example of the ideal personality. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? And Christ is a pretty damn high example of honoring tradition, right? And again, in the chapter, he talks about Jesus knew all of all of the rules and all of the arguments of the Talmud. He understood it all. But then he went on to break it in service of the spirit of the law. He broke the law in service of the spirit of the law. He's a prime example of understanding the conservative values and understanding the creative values.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever story, each of us individually, to the degree that we create an ideal personality, that isn't like a moral, you should do this, like self-righteous, if you do this, you're good, and if you don't do, but like really, like what's ideal? That there's something about that which is the song of your heart. This is the highest expression of who you think you can be. This is your greatest expression.
Yeah.
And you set that ideal. And you use that ideal, if you build the responsibility and the character to have that be the story you're telling, that be the goal that you're going after, rather than any of the lower goals, then you don't denigrate the social institutions and you move into the higher. The creation of that ideal personality is the act of responsibility. That's the act of heroism. It's to learn to articulate that and then to shape your behavior such that it becomes increasingly consistent with that, with the understanding that you're always going to fail. Because that ideal personality is always better than your current capacity, even as you grow it.
Yeah.
And to be okay with that. To recognize it, again, there's infinity further to go, but you don't denigrate who you are right now because you're not there. But you focus on that. That willpower, the power of your ability to say, I will. This is the story I am going to tell. I can, like, here's, the world is happening. I'm having the experience. What story am I going to tell about it? To the degree that I really work on my meta stories, and Jordan Peterson, again, uses the myths of the world and says, look, they're not the full thing, but they're the best we got. You need to have the highest possible goal to move towards. You need to have the highest possible adventure so that you become the highest possible agent. Because if you do that, and if you take responsibility, then your life will be meaningful. And then all of the pain and suffering of life won't take you down. Because you're pursuing something so valuable that you're willing. You are bigger than the pain. Who you are is bigger than the pain. And if you denigrate that, if you denigrate that, then
in that sense of, I'm thinking about when he, in the beginning of the chapter, right, when he talked about the client that he had that had all the neglect and had little social coordination, and he talked about where he noticed that if he stayed quiet, right, for the first 50 minutes of that, right, and that's difficult for him to do. It's like, but when I did that, right, and he just paid attention and listened, and years of him talking through that, right, there's something about that him noticing, okay, wait a minute, it seems to go better if I listen, if I just listen. And he goes on to say that is, human beings need to be they need to organize their mind, and how they do that is through thinking, and how we usually think is through talking, right? And so just letting him talk and grapple and come to terms, right, with his life. Right?
In the context of Jordan Peterson listening
exactly
with a particular perspective, with a caring listening, not denigrating. It's like circling, like he's listening to him.
Hang on, we're getting there. Hang on. So, so, so that, and I think this is the subtlety with, I believe that he's kind of coming to, which I'm hearing, and I'm just noticing, my attention keeps circling around. I'm like, whoa, this is really profound what he's saying, right? It's that listening to the phenomena. It's that relationship with what shows itself, that the listening, because they talk about this a lot, of that on a kind of ontologically speaking, how there's only a speaking, that there's always all speech arises from a listening, right? A listening calls forth speech, right? So it's hard to imagine like just a speech that wasn't in response to a listening, right? So there's got to be a listening that calls forth speech. So that sense of just where he's talking about, of bringing it back into what my son's doing in this, right, in his first job, is going into a situation, which we're always in a situation, right? And paying attention and listening to what's happening, listening, right? And that there's something that if you do that, what listening does, what attention does, right, when it's coming from this place that we're talking about, is it will on its own make distinctions and begin to abstract out themes, right? And in those themes start to, that's in somehow that that meta story, you can in some sense birth it with your listening, like through paying attention, you can start to get a greater sense of the whole, such that, for example, with your wife, she can sing your song in just that right moment when you maybe don't have total access to yourself. Mm-hmm. And you can remember, it's through that paying attention, right, and deeply respecting and listening to the order that's happening, right, that client was able to talk through, right, all the stuff in his life, and get to the point where at some point it in some senses, listening, you could say Peterson's listening helped to midwife him back into the world, right?
Yeah.
And all the ways he started to participate in the world.
Jordan says some intense things. He says that, like, we outsource sanity to other people. Being alone with your own thoughts leads to insanity. You put somebody in solitary confinement and they go insane. Yeah. Why? Because they can't check themselves. Like his granddaughter points and they either think it's interesting or not. And so she learns. And the guy's talking and he's listening in such a way that he's noticing the patterns of depth. Perhaps he's listening for the song of his soul. Yeah. And therefore all of his responses give the man the safety, the visibility, the caring, the love, the attention, such that he can be with his own experience because he's getting subtle feedback about where he's going deeper and where he's going shallow, and so he goes deeper. Now, I'm going to need to end. Mm-hmm. He does not denigrate. Mm-hmm. And in not denigrating, he listens for that which is deeper. And there's something about caring, being taking responsibility, treating yourself, but also treating others as if they're someone you're responsible for. To bring that kind of listening allows them to become who they could be, and that leads into the next chapter, right? Imagine who you could be, right? And then aim single-mindedly towards that.
Right.
Right. What is this heroic higher self, the ideal personality?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how do you make that your central goal?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How do you make that your master reality? Such that you can aim single-mindedly towards that. How do you go beyond order towards the ideal?
Yeah.
And that's where we go. That's where we go to next. And I got a jet.
Okay. Bye.
Pleasure, sir.
Bye.
This brings us to the end of this episode of Chaos, Logos, Order, where we apply the ideas of Jordan Peterson in order to create lives of increasingly heroic meaning. With our hosts, Guy Sengstock of thecirclinginstitute.com and Mark Michael Lewis from thegameofheroicmeaning.com. We're going through Jordan Peterson's new book, Beyond Order, chapter by chapter. In this episode, we went through Chapter 1, Do Not Carelessly Denigrate Social Institutions or Creative Achievement. If you found this helpful and you want more, join us in our next episode as we go through Chapter 2, Imagine Who You Could Be and then aim single-mindedly at that. And as always, we leave you with a challenge. Make your deepest happiness your highest priority.